Dale. Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Clara. I'm Clara Nasta from Buenos Aires Open Center. Thank you for being there this morning. Okay, we've been asked by many to organize a webinar on the assessment of writing at levels B2 and C1. And that's why we have organized this meeting today. Thank you. We know that Tuesday morning is not such an easy day and time, but we value your attending this webinar, let's say. Okay, well, maybe some of you know me. For those who don't, my name is Clara Nasta. I work at Buenos Aires Open Center. I'm in charge of different lines of exams here at BAUC. And I've also run different exam departments throughout my career, and I have a lot of experience in the field of assessment. So the idea when I prepare this webinar is to summarize for you, well, the main principles of the B2 1C1 expectations in the writing department, let's say, try to understand the principles behind all the tasks that are assigned in the different exams in this paper, and then we'll work with you so that you can take home, let's say, some clear ideas on how to approach the preparation with your students, and also how to mark the writings that you receive from your students. I hope that, well, all of you can hear me well, and if not, you can say if there's any problem. You can use the chat, the YouTube chat. At some point, we will be working with the assessment criteria and with 2 samples of writings that I understand when you registered for this event, they shared the link to those materials with you. So I will be showing that on the screen, but if you have them handy, that will be lovely too, right? For you to be able to work with that more comfortably. So, okay, as I said, let's have a look at the aims of today's session. It's going to take about an hour and a half, and we'll be dealing with mainly these aims, right? Develop confidence in preparing learners for the writing paper in general, for both levels, B2 and C1. That confidence will derive from your understanding of what is expected and from the students, and what you can do as teachers to prepare them and also help them become familiar with the aims and also with the criteria, the assessment criteria. So it's a process of coaching. I like to call it that way. We're coaching at these levels, B2 and C1. Students have achieved a certain level of autonomy, and they are somehow comfortable using the language. So our role as teachers is more of the one of a coach. So we're accompanying them in that journey of writing. Then understand, another aim of the session is for you to understand the assessment criteria, I mean the principles behind that, in order to be able to transmit that to your students and adapt those principles in such a way that they can be understood by adolescents or young adults And then develop a practical method, something that you can apply, but you will be able to apply that method once you have understood the principles of the assessment criteria, the different areas, and also the descriptive bands. So once you have understood that, you will be able to apply this method in a practical way every time you have to correct or mark your students' work. So that's the aim for this morning. So let's have a look at the writing paper overall for both levels and remind ourselves of the different tasks that students are faced with in this paper. You know, B2 first for schools, we know that students are asked to produce 2 pieces of writing. The first one, part 1, is a compulsory task. They have to write an essay. It is an opinion essay or an essay in which they have to discuss ideas, support a position, right? So that's part 1 of the B2 section, of the B2 writing section. And then they have part 2, and in that part they have options they can choose, and we're going to see now the summary. There you have, well, part 1, part 2, number of questions, 1 per part, the marks that each piece of writing is assigned. Those marks are arrived at once the assessment criteria has been applied. The word range that they have to produce is between 150 and 190. Remember that they have always, there is like a tolerance margin. So it's like 10% more could be accepted in, in the number of words, right? Or 10% less, but basically that's the margin that is acceptable, right? And then, as I said, the focus of the assessment in part 1 is the ability of the candidates to express agreement, disagreement, play with ideas, be able to organize their thoughts and translate that into a series of ideas that are connected, that are relevant, that show a good command of language in the sense that they can use structures and lexis that is appropriate for the level that they are trying to certify, right? And in part 2, they are faced with different options. They can choose to write an article, an email or letter, a review, or a story, especially in B2 first for schools. Story is included as an option, right? So that is a description of the writing paper for B2. Then, because we said that this morning we're going to concentrate on B2 and C1, we find that in C1, they are also faced with 2 tasks. They have to write, in part 1, they are asked to write an essay. It's a discursive essay. Again, it has to do with showing their ability to to express ideas and like somewhat play with those ideas, oppose them, arrange them in a way that they are supportive of a more of the strongest idea in the piece. Of course, then we are going to analyze the difference in expectations from the assessors between a B2 and a C1 level, right? So basically, in both exams, part 1, they are asked to produce an essay, but the expectation of complexity is of course, stronger in C1. And let's have a look at the summary of tasks. This is C1, part 1, write an essay with a discursive focus. right? In this, this is one of the points in which we can notice the more sophisticated ability that is expected of a C1 candidate, in the sense that they have to show their ability to, let's call it, play with ideas, be able to express them as precisely as possible with a more sophisticated level of command of structures and lexis, with more ambitious use of cohesive devices in the area of organization, with a stronger ability to be able to produce an essay with the right format, a letter with the right format, an article that when you read it, you realize it's an article because of their ability to use all the elements of that. So we can notice some kind of development between a B2 and a C1 candidate in that sense. And then part 2 of C1 is also another piece of writing in which they have a choice of genres. Again, they are asked to produce a letter or an email, a proposal, a report, or a review. And they are expected to produce more words, right? So they have there you have 220 to 260 words. That is the expectation. And the ability to do and to fulfill the task in that number of words is also part of the assessment and part of the achievement of the task. Okay, so as I was mentioning, there is, of course, there is variance in the expectation of performance between a B2 and a C1. If you look there, here we are dealing with 3 areas: communicative achievement, their ability to do what they have to do, communicate the content that they are asked to communicate in the right way, organization, like guiding the reader towards a successful understanding of the message through organization, and then language, of course, their ability to use more like everyday vocabulary in the case of B2, but with a good degree of command, and also expressions, structures that could be simple when they have to use simple structures. It's not necessary to always use complicated structures to show that you are a good user of the language. On the contrary, the more comfortable they are with using the language, the easier they will find it to know when they have to use a simpler structure and when it is necessary to introduce or put into practice some more complex structures that they've been learning. Sometimes when you notice the less strong candidates, the B2 candidates, they try just to use the structures because they have learned them. And sometimes the piece of writing ends up being awkward because, well, we say, okay, I see the poor thing is trying to use these structures because they have learned, but somehow they are not necessary here. So not because you are a sophisticated user of the language, you are going to use complex language all the time. So the ability to adapt to context and to genre, and now we're going to see that, is also taken into account when they assess the writing. But again, well, here I selected this slide because in this case, then we will share some of these of this content with you, and it is important to bear that in mind when you have to prepare a C1 candidate, to be able to understand that as a teacher, the gap in expectation, and also to be able to work with that with the student, and the student has to understand what is expected. I mean, why they are taking the next step. In C1, the main aim is getting the students to really use more sophisticated in the sense of more precise vocabulary, really, but in the right context and when it is necessary, so that it will sound natural. Now, so this is what our students, when I talk about coaching, this is what our students need to do. First, they need to understand what they have to do in the writing paper, right? Becoming familiar with the writing task, the different writing tasks. And that is your job as a teacher, to introduce them to, in a B2, when you start a B2 course, you start preparing them for a B2 exam. Well, making them aware that they are coming, maybe some of them have already taken B1, and they were asked to write an email. They were asked to write a paragraph or 2 paragraphs expressing an opinion, paving the way for written communication, and well, basically concentrating on those 2 genres. Now the choice will be wider, and they will have to refine their ability as writers and be able to communicate ideas in different formats, let's say. So they have to familiarize themselves with the different genres, format and purpose, because that's the essence of each genre. Like, for example, they have to write a letter. Well, pay attention, because you have to be careful and learn how to write a letter, salutations, introductory phrases, then developing your message, then concluding the letter. Again, ways of less formal ways, more formal ways of ending letters. And then purpose. That letter can have different purposes. It could be a recommendation. It could be a letter asking for something. So in each genre, well, part of the job of the teacher is to make it very clear to our students what they have to do, what they have to communicate, and in which formats. Then finally, the ideal thing would be that they also learn to judge their own performance in the light of the assessment criteria. So this is all part of the coaching process in writing. Well, as we said, B2 writing, part 1, essay, the language focus has to do with different functions that they are expected to use. So they are asked to write an essay. They basically have to express ideas based on some content, some input that they receive. And so it's an essay, it's a formal essay, that's one of the elements. They may have to agree or disagree with an idea. So that's one function of the language, that they need to be trained on how to perform that function. The right language, they would need the right cohesive devices. They will be asked probably to give information to, in order to be able then to express opinions regarding that information, right? So opinions, agreeing and disagreeing, giving information to introduce a topic, giving reasons to support the opinion, and maybe if there are 2 positions, they will have to be able to compare and contrast those ideas. This has also an echo with what they have to do in some parts of the speaking paper. So for teaching and for classroom work, it is also a good idea to find those echoes, because we are in the production area, writing and speaking, production. So these functions of the language will repeat themselves in both areas. Okay, and then in part 2 of B2 and C1, here I have put both levels together because they share some genres. These are the main types of writings that they are asked to produce. In B2, one of the options is the article. As I mentioned these options, I'd like you to think what an article is and how it compares with an essay. What similarities and differences are there between an essay and an article? They may also, they are asked also to write letters or emails in both levels. They are also asked to write reports or reviews. The review is quite popular with B2 candidates. Stories, in the case of B2 first for schools, and proposals in C1. So those are the different formats, the genres that they have to be trained on. And in order to just remind ourselves of what is implied in each genre, here is a multiple matching. If we were having this meeting face to face, I would probably ask you to, I would just give you some time to look at these and join with arrows. Here I have done it for you. Let's revise this so that it's clear in our minds. An article, the description is the one at the bottom. It may appear in some kind of publication. It has a specific reader in mind. It discusses ideas. So as I was telling you, essay and article are similar, but one of the main differences is that the article is meant to be published somewhere, which it could be any kind of publication, more or less formal, and that will also dictate the reader. So when they write an article, they have to have that very clear in mind in order to make decisions on how formal, informal it will be, and many things that are that go hand in hand with having the reader clear in mind. Then you have an email, of course. Emails and letters are similar, the difference being that letters tend to be more formal than emails. Then a review includes an opinion about something, about an experience. So the review is based on an experience of reading a book, having gone to a restaurant, having seen a film. So there is this implicit content, and they will have to somehow refer to that, then express an opinion, judge the experience, and then conclude it with a recommendation. So different functions of the language that will have to be present in that review. Story has to do with, of course, an event that they will have to describe, they will have to develop that event, they will have to be good users of tenses, and they will have to be able to catch the reader's attention. Organization will be important in writing a review too. And then a proposal for a C1. This is a piece of formal writing. It could be written for a peer group, for an authority, for some kind of city council or authority of some kind. It will contain suggestions, but those suggestions will have to be supported by ideas. So a little bit of everything in writing a proposal. So that is for you to have it very clear. I mean, the different formats that they will have to produce, both for B2 and C1. And, well, here we come to the part where we have to deal with the assessment criteria. Here, I mean, working with the assessment criteria can be and is really very fruitful, both for teachers and for students, but it is also challenging. So teachers and writing coaches have to understand that criteria, and also students need to. Of course, students are equipped with, I mean, fewer resources because they are students. So the idea is that teachers could somehow understand that and be able to make it accessible to students so that they can apply it to their own writing. Here, for example, if you were asked, let's have a look at this apple. We are always judging. We are always, even though we are not expressing our judgment or our opinions, but in life, we are always looking at things and thinking and having our own opinions. And you go, for example, to the greengrocers, you see that apple, and you have an opinion about the apple, right? You like it, you don't, you think it is better, it would be tasty, or it's shiny, it's dull, right? If you had to rate an apple from 1 to 6, I mean, just off the top of your head, right? You had to give a rating to that apple. Maybe you would say, oh, for me, that apple is a 2, or someone can say it's a 5. But then if you had to justify your rating, they will say, okay, it's a 2. Why do you think it's not good? And then you would probably start giving reasons for that. And once you have to start giving reasons, what do you need? I mean, you will start with, well, I think it's not very good because it's not shiny. It looks a bit, it doesn't look fresh. I can imagine it's not juicy. So you start mentioning or adjectives or qualities, and those qualities inevitably come from some criteria that you have built into your thinking. It's something that you have learned because you have eaten many apples from your experience, but also maybe of your knowledge of some standards that are used to judge fruit in this case. Well, the same happens with judging a piece of written production, especially when you're dealing with an international exam and you need you need objective standards. You have to rely on some kind of criteria, and that gives origin to the assessment criteria for the different areas of the exam, right? You first have a content part. You see, for example, this is a slide that shows the assessment criteria for C1 writing. As you probably are familiar, they deal with 4 main areas: the area of content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. Now, we may ask ourselves, is this a teacher tool? Is this a learner tool? Can it be adapted? Okay, you may give me your opinions on the chat. I can see them. Would you say that this could be used with learners? Yes, no, does it need adaptation? Do you actually use it as it is, like this? Do you adapt it? Have you applied any ideas to kind of lower it and take it to a level that is easy to understand for students. I can read your comments in the chat, so if you'd like to mention some, you may. I know there is some kind of delay between the moment I speak and the moment I will see your answers, but I am starting to see some answers. It looks like a teacher tool, definitely. We could adapt it. Yeah. It looks like a teacher tool. And let me tell you that it also looks, and it is, an assessor's tool, right? Because this is the instrument used by assessors, people that are experts in assessing production. So a teacher maybe is more focused on, of course, teaching, right? And so in order to, of course, as a teacher, you understand this, but maybe it's not so natural for you to use it as such when you mark your students' production. And you say, it's okay, I understand it, I see the value of it, and I see the value of my students understanding it, but there is some kind of transition I need to do in the middle, right? So that it will really help me as a teacher, and also in order to correct my students' writing and be able to give them feedback based on this criteria, feedback that will be rich and useful for them, because it will help them improve what they have to improve, and they will also realize all the things they are doing well. So the idea, let me see some more answers here. They think it's both. I use it so as to teach them what to pay attention to. Good. It has to be adapted. All right, I find it difficult to use it. Okay. All right, so as we said, there are 4 areas here. This is common to C1 and B2. There is another set of criteria for B2, but the areas are basically the same. So in order to make good use of it, let's concentrate first on understanding. Make the criteria meaningful to you and your students. So, when they talk about content, what are they talking about? That it doesn't seem too difficult to understand, but it is very important that you are able to identify each area with the focus of that area, so that when you correct your students' work, you don't penalize maybe some kind of error in both areas, because that is, or sometimes you see that there is something wrong, but you don't know whether it is content, whether it is communicative achievement. So let's try to make that very clear. So when they talk about content, they are basically referring to whether or not this student has or is talking about what he or she should be talking about. Is this relevant? Does it have to do with a rubric? Are they really answering the question? Are they writing an essay on the given topic, right? So, content. Are they talking about the right topic? Has the candidate answered the question? This is basically the question for our checklist, right? Then, when we talk about communicative achievement, there are other elements to take into account. We said that they are expected to produce different types of writing: article, review, story, email, letter. Okay, So communicative achievement has to do with format, with being able to, okay, I am answering this question, I am producing the right content, but I have to produce it in the format of an essay, and it has to look like an essay. So the assessor, when looking at my piece in the communicative achievement area, will be saying, okay, he has, for example, first certificate. They are writing the essay, they have covered the two ideas that they had to use are included, so content, okay. But now, what about the register? Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it the register I would expect in an essay, right? An essay should be divided into paragraphs, should contain a development of an idea. I should be finding an introduction, maybe a paragraph for each position, a conclusion. Are those elements present? Well, that has to do with communicative achievement. So the question for communicative achievement would be, how suitable is the language for the task? Are the correct linguistic conventions used for the text type or genre? I mean, what are the linguistic conventions? The elements that make an essay, a letter. The fact that we start a letter with dear or something like that, or hi for an email, well, all that has to be present, and it will mark the presence of the genre, right? The article, a review could have subtitles, could have divisions, ends with a recommendation. Well, if all those elements start to be visible, maybe, yes, I am in the presence of an essay, I am in the presence of a review, and it depends then on how well the piece is written. Then we will have the different bands, and okay, it's an essay, but the conclusion is only one sentence, so there is an attempt at writing an essay, at including a conclusion, but that needs development. Well, so I will start playing with the bands. But first I have to see that the elements are present or not. Okay, then organization, this is easier to understand. This is whether the text is organized and structured, the reader doesn't get lost, the idea can be followed. If all that happens, it means that we may be in the presence of some kind of organization, paragraphing, punctuation, cohesive devices, coherence in the ideas that are presented, reference, substitution, different markers of organization may be present, but this is what we have to be looking for. So when you say, oh, okay, he or she has been able to use, I don't know, vocabulary, structures, I see that present. It has the format of an essay. They are answering the question in the rubric, but I cannot follow this. I mean, it's so difficult. I have to go back again and read and reread. Well, maybe there the problem is, surely, not maybe, we have an organization problem. So we will have to concentrate and read the different bands, descriptor bands, to find the right, the right score for that piece of writing in the field of organization. So be able, as an assessor, you are a teacher, but you also have to be an assessor, and you have to be able to apply the assessment criteria correctly. And well, this is something that may happen to you. Sometimes you see something's wrong. First effort you have to do is try to determine which of the four areas has the problem in that thing that you don't like. Well, and then language. Is the candidate using appropriate range of grammar and vocabulary for the level? The level is always very important. I mean, you always have to bear in mind which level you are correcting to be able to decide whether the language is appropriate or not. Okay. Okay, so now here is a checklist. I mean, once we have understood this, we can translate this into a checklist for our students. So they should be, once they have finished their writing, these are some questions that they could ask themselves. Have I answered the question on the paper? I mean, go back to the rubric. Okay, you have finished. You think that you have finished your piece of writing. Go back to the rubric and check that you are really answering the question and that, for example, in part 1, which is, they are very specific with the fact that they have to use these ideas, or in C1, at least 2 of the 3 ideas that are presented. Well, check that you have done that. If you notice something's wrong, you will have to sort of, if you have time, you will have to try to improve that. If not, your piece will suffer in that area. Then, communicative achievement. They have to make sure that they have used the correct conventions for the task that we have mentioned, right? So, be sure that if it is a letter, it looks like a letter, it has the elements of a letter, the correct register, right? And that you are consistent with that from beginning to end. Of course, don't start formally and then switch to more informal and then, oh, you remember and you go back. Well, all those things that they have to watch. Then organization, check that your ideas are clear to follow, that you have used elements that help the reader to follow what you mean to communicate. And then language, of course, have a look at what you have written and quickly look for areas where they also have, at this point, probably they know themselves and probably they know that, I mean, they tend to forget, they tend to make mistakes with past tenses, they tend to forget the S, they have problems with agreement of number. So all the things, learn to know your typical mistakes and go and look for those in the language department. And then, well, so this could be a checklist that you could use with your students. And then once you have, so far we have concentrated on the different areas and understanding what they mean by content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. Now, another thing that we have to understand very well in order to be able to apply the assessment criteria, both for B2 and C1, considering the differences in levels, is being able to read with a critical eye the descriptors, the 1 to 5 bands for each area. Maybe you are already familiar with this. You have already done this exercise of, well, look at band 3, which is standard performance for the level, and look also at band 5 and underline or identify keywords that make the difference between a 3 and a 5. For example, this exercise, we can do it now. I will show you now on the screen band 5 for B2. But if you can access the documents we shared with you, you also have that with you. You should be looking at the B2 assessment criteria, band 5, for example. So look at band 5 and identify the keywords that define top-level performance in all 4 areas, right? It could be also C1. I mean, if it could be any, because the idea is that we identify the keywords that define top performance, right? You may also look at both. So take some time, two minutes to do that. And then I will show you what I have found. If you find keywords and you want to share your findings on the chat, I will be happy to read that. It could be band 5 of C1 or B2, doesn't matter. For those who may not have the document handy, here you can see band 5. This is C1. Okay, I see relevant content, use of conventions, well organized, wide range of vocabulary, fully informed, complex ideas. Yes, very good. I will show you. Here is a summary of what I have found, and I see that you have also found. So here, for example, all content is relevant. Of course, in the area of content, we're talking about a band 5. We will find that all content that appears in the piece of writing is relevant. There are no loose ends. There is no information that you don't know why they have included that information, right? Then uses the conventions of the communicative task to express complex ideas in an effective way. Probably the key word here is complexity and effectiveness. We're talking about a C1 especially, right? This is an expectation for a C1 level. The fact that they are able to communicate complex ideas effectively, that will give us a band 5. Some of them will be able to communicate maybe complex ideas or will attempt, but they will be less effective or make more mistakes when trying to apply or use more complex structures and lexis. So there is where you will have the degrees, right? It won't be a 5, maybe it will be a 4 or a 3 or even a 2, depending on the number of inaccuracies. But also, so you have to take into account the area, the band descriptors, and the level. So those 3 elements have to be present in your mind when you are assessing the writing using this tool, which is the assessment criteria. Then organization, top band, a 5 band, well organized. Well, but that well really means well, right? Skillfully organized. A variety of cohesive devices, not only the basic ones, but and not only markers, evident markers, but our cohesive devices as such, but also elements. I mean, the choice of words, the tone, the connection between ideas, more sophisticated strategies like ellipsis, substitution in a C1 level. If those things are present, well, that will be giving us a band 5. Ease and flexibility. Ease and flexibility, I mean, this is that when we read the text, we see that the writer uses the language with ease and flexibility. That will give us an idea that this is a piece that deserves a 4 or 5 band. Ample range of lexical and grammatical resources, effectively, precisely, used effectively, used with precision, with accuracy, and with sophistication. And there may be errors because we always have, we may always find some kind of mistake, but in a band 5, those errors or mistakes will be maybe present when they try to use less common words or structures, or they will be simply slips when you realize, okay, this is wrong, but I mean, in such a strong writer, I can realize this was a slip, maybe because he didn't have enough time or just he was just distracted and didn't pay attention to that. Well, you may repeat this exercise with a band 3 and with a band 1, and then you will have a better idea of the measurement degrees across bands. Okay. Now, once we have understood the areas, content, communicative achievement, organization, language, what is meant by that, then we have been able to grasp what they mean when they write those descriptors, the different bands, right? Then we could say that we could be ready to try to apply this criteria, hands-on, right? So this is like a practical method in 5 steps that you could use in order to try and put into practice the assessment criteria. In this case, for writing, B2 and C1, but then you could also do the same when you are trying to establish or trying to assess the spoken production of your students. There are a lot of similarities if you compare the assessment criteria for writing and speaking. But then, let's see, this is like very basic, I mean, some practical ideas. I do it like this, but you may have your own methods, but I thought to just put this together for you and summarize it for you. So you can have a pencil, a green pen or whatever color pen, and then 4 color highlighters for the 4 areas of the assessment criteria. So, well, you read the piece, you read your students' writing, underline the problem areas in pencil, and just do that, right? When you give it a first read, you just take your pencil, you mark those things that you don't like, there is a problem there, you don't know, maybe at this stage, you don't know exactly what the problem is, but something's wrong. So just mark it with pencil, in pencil, and then also you may, I mean, do not only, of course, concentrate on the bad and areas and problems, but also this happens all the time, that you're reading the piece and you say, okay, this is wrong, but oh, look, lovely. Oh, she has used this, and I don't know, passive voice here, which is so good. But then, oops, a mistake in tenses, 2 lines after that. Well, but okay, so you have your color, your green pen or any color that you like, in order to mark the good things as well. Because remember that when we give final feedback, we have to mention both aspects, the good things and the things that need some work and improvement. So you mark problems in pencil, then you also mark the things that have been done well, and then you take your 4 highlighters and assign a different color to each criterion. So there are a lot of fancy highlighters now, and you go to Todo Moda and you buy a nice set of highlighters, and you have one for content, another for communicative achievement, for organization, and for language. And now you go back to those parts that you first marked in pencil, and then you make your decisions about, okay, this is a language mistake, orange for language mistake. Here I cannot follow, I have to read again. There is no agreement between this part and the other. Okay, this is organization. You mark it with another highlighter. Then you look at it, overall, from a general point of view, you say, okay, it's a letter, but it starts like a letter, but then there is no salutation at the end. There is no appropriate ending for a letter. Well, you mark that in the communicative achievement area. And wherever you find irrelevant information or something that has nothing to do with the topic, the main topic of the writing, well, then probably that is a problem of content, and you mark it with the right highlighters. Once you have all that map before your eyes, you will be able to go back to the assessment criteria and pay attention to the descriptors, the bands, the 3 band, the 5 band, the in-between bands, and then decide for each area which rating you give the piece. Remember that, of course, the ratings are not uniform. In all the, when we read examiner comments, we see that sometimes the piece gets a 2 for grammar and vocabulary, and then a 4 in organization, and so that those areas are independent, let's say. And that's basically those are basically the 5 steps that you could try and systematize when you have to correct a piece of writing, especially, maybe not in every piece that you correct. There are times when you make your students write in class or at home for different purposes, but definitely when you are marking exam tasks or mocks, writing mocks, definitely this is something that you could apply when doing that. And now let's have a look. I will check the time. Yes. When you registered, we included some sample writings that we could use to work together today. This is an example of a C1, the introduction to part 1, the essay in C1, right? They are asked to produce a discursive essay. So what does the candidate have to do here? Well, they have to write an essay Think about each of the assessment criteria. I mean, you as a teacher, and also when you show your students the sample, make them, if you have made them familiar with the assessment criteria before, once you are advanced and they have become familiar with the different genres and become familiar with the assessment criteria, well, maybe train them to approach the reading of the rubric with those concepts in mind, with the assessment criteria. So, okay, I have to write an essay, it's formal, that has to do with communicative achievement. Content, well, the content will be dictated by this rubric. So I have to read the rubric carefully and I have to think quickly. I mean, make decisions. I know that I have to use at least two of the ideas in the notes. So that's another technique or thing that you should achieve with your students. Trying to systematize in their approach to the task the question of having the areas in mind, right? And then if it is an essay, okay, it's formal and I have to include this content and I have to organization. I have to organize my ideas. So I have to decide how many paragraphs. Will it be 4? Will it be 5? How will I connect those paragraphs, right? I have to include a conclusion. It shouldn't be short. I mean, I should assign a balanced number of words and lines to each paragraph. So think about that while you're reading that. And then, of course, use the best possible structures and vocabulary that I am able to produce. Yes, B2 or C1. So this is the rubric. I mean, they have to write an essay. You have it in your handouts, the ones we shared. And this is this is an actual piece of writing that I invite you to look at and try to give it a rating in the 4 areas. So take some time to read it in the light of the assessment criteria for C1, and then we will have a look at another piece for B2. Take some time. You may give your you may write your guesses on the chat. A mark for content, a mark for communicative achievement, for organization, and for language. Whenever you're ready, you may give your ratings on the chat. Just write content and the number, communicative achievement and a number, organization and a number. and then I will share the comments from the assessors, from the examiner comments. Okay. I cannot see any answers there. I will share some of the comments that we have from the experts. This is the rating that this piece gets. So as far as content is concerned, this is a 5, right? It's all content has been included. It is relevant. I mean, all the content is relevant to the task, and the target reader is fully informed. The candidate discusses 2 of the proposed facilities, so that's part of the task 2. It will probably be praised in the area of communicative achievement 2. And a final decision is made in the final paragraph, and there is a discussion of ideas, a coherent discussion of the reasons why each idea is exposed. Then in the communicative achievement area, the piece gets a 3. Apparently, some problems were present. So the conventions, the general conventions of the essay writing are well used. There is a clear opening paragraph, a strong conclusion, right? The register is consistently formal, and the essay has an objective tone, giving opinions and providing supporting statements with evidence. The clear paragraphing helps to hold the target reader's attention and communicate both straightforward and more complex ideas in a logical manner. Still, I think that maybe one of the weaknesses here is the fact that the ending is a bit abrupt and short, and maybe it lost some points there, right? In the organization area, the text is well organized and coherent. There is a mix of long and short sentences, and some of the shorter ones could benefit from being combined. So in that area, it could have been improved, taking into account that this is a C1 level. I mean, it is a logical text and ideas can be followed, but probably maybe there wasn't enough time for the candidate, but those shorter ideas could have been combined. So that is like a piece of criticism that probably lowers the mark there. And then in the language area, we have a problem. Sorry. There is a range of relevant vocabulary, but this is not always used successfully to communicate full ideas. So the vocabulary is relevant. I mean, it's there, but the writer is not sophisticated enough to have been able to use it with a successful communication aim. So that's why it gets a lower mark in this area. And there are examples of that. Although this has an appropriate tone and it's accurate, it has little relevance to the text as a whole and adds no extra information. This is the kind of finding that justifies this mark in the language area. A range of simple and some more complex grammatical structures is used with control. However, there are a few word order and let me check. I cannot read this. Oops. Let me share again. Sorry that something happened with my sharing of the screen. I'm coming back. Okay. So there we go. There are also errors with plurals and articles. So this is basic for this level. This is a basic mistake. That's why it's given a 2. These do not impede communication, but they shouldn't be present. I mean, it doesn't add to the quality and it makes it a bit untidy. I mean, no one will cease to understand the point, but somehow finding these kind of errors at this level is not nice. That's why, well, they are especially taken into account in the area of language. Okay. Here I have another piece. This is also in your handout. This is the B2 essay, part 1, and the rubric is there too, right? Teenagers are too young to teach other people about anything. In the rubric for B2, part 1, they always get an introductory statement like this that sets the topic, and they are invited to express their agreement or disagreement. And they are given 2 ideas that they have to include. And then a third idea, they are invited to add their own idea. This is a sample answer to this question. And you may also take some minutes to look at it and have a look, if you have it handy, at the assessment criteria for B2. I will show it to you too. Even if you don't have the assessment criteria there, but you have a 1 to 5 scale in mind, how would you rate this piece in the content area from 1 to 5, taking into account that this is a B2? If you want, I see Joaquin Gonzalez says content 4. I think that the content is relevant to the rubric. I agree with Joaquin. For a B2 level, all the ideas that have been included are relevant and they are connected. So it makes sense also in the organization part. Now I see communicative achievement. Let's see that. 3 for communicative achievement. So Laura says content 3, Joaquin says organization 2. Let's have a look at communicative achievement. This is an essay, right? It's an essay. We see an attempt to use more formal language for a B2 student. There is division in paragraphs. There is development of ideas. So communicative achievement is covered not at a top performance level, but I agree that this would be between a 3 and a 2. Then I will give you the comments from the assessors in the area of communicative achievement. Then if we look at language, let me see, language 2, somebody says language 2, many people say language 2, and here I have some justifications for that. No contractions are accepted, yeah, it's a formal essay, so contractions should be avoided. And what about personal experience? Example, talking about her granny. That would be maybe a bit informal, probably, for an essay, or maybe the way it is expressed. I will read you the examiner's comments. These pieces you can all find or in the handbook for teachers, right? So then if you want, you can go back and see the details there. But the piece has been given 5 in content. It says all the content is relevant and the target reader is fully informed. Ideas are discussed in a logical way, right? In the second point concerning environment, the candidate explains that teenagers have time to learn about environmental problems and should share this knowledge. Okay, so in general content, I mean, it is given a very good rating. In communicative achievement, the piece gets a 2. Because straightforward ideas are communicated and the conventions of the essay task are used in generally appropriate ways, but some parts are not so appropriate, so that's why they mention this word generally, and that's one of the key words that we highlight when we analyze the bands, right? It's not always, but generally. Okay, so there are points that could have been organized or exploited more successfully by discussing them in a distinct paragraph. So maybe the idea of division into paragraphs, which helps to develop ideas in an essay, and that reinforces the idea that we are writing an essay, and so paragraphing sometimes is functional to the development of ideas, is not so well exploited here. That's why it gets a 2 in communicative achievement. In organization, it gets a 3. The essay is generally well organized with a clear introduction and paragraphs. There are a variety of linking words and cohesive devices. The conclusion doesn't summarize all of the main points, but it does state an opinion on the central question, so it is relevant too. And it's logical. That's why it is taken into account in the development of ideas in the organization area. And then language. For language, the piece gets a 2. A range of everyday vocabulary is used appropriately in the context of this essay. Simple grammatical forms are used with a good degree of control, but there are a number of errors when more complex forms are attempted. That's why, I mean, in a B2, you expect a higher level of control when attempting more complex structures. Maybe not a full degree, because that is an expectation. I mean, more control and more sophistication and more accuracy are associated with a C1. But the fact that there are basic mistakes in simpler structures, I mean, it's a downgrade for a piece if it is judged in the context of a B2 level. So the number of errors affects the overall communicative achievement, although the intended meaning can still be determined. I mean, we can determine the meaning, but the errors are there, and that's why it doesn't get to the standard of 3, which would be expected for a B2 performance. All right, now, okay, this is, so now that we have looked at the assessment criteria for both levels, and we have, I mean, being able to devote some time to reading some samples, this would be a summary checklist that you could take into account for this coaching process. So familiarize students with exam task types and topics. Train them to read the questions carefully, and while they are reading the questions, this exercise of always having in mind the assessment criteria and the expectation. Maybe not so precisely, but maybe just being aware of what they will be expected to produce. And also take into account that in their planning of their answers. Make them aware of the time allowed and encourage them to use it wisely. Emphasize they should choose appropriate style and tone bearing genre and target reader in mind. So this is communicative achievement. Teach students to organize their ideas effectively using linkers and cohesive devices. Organization. Always encourage learners to use a range of complex language because they need to show they can perform at B2 level. And the difference has to be evident between a B1 and a B2. This is an B2, intermediate level, but a higher intermediate. So come on, take the risk, even if you make mistakes. They may make mistakes, but their attempt will be praised.
Clara, sorry to interrupt, but could you show the slide with the results, please? Because you read them, but you didn't show the slide.
I'm afraid that I don't have it here on the slides. That's why I read it. But I can share that with the attendees later on. Would you like me to read some part of that again?
No, I don't think it's necessary. We can share it by mail.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
We will.
Thank you, Clara.
Okay. Okay. Then some conclusions. Let me check the time we have. Yes, we are reaching the end of the presentation. So maybe it's a good point to look at the conclusions. Understand the different tasks, including in the writing paper. This is basic for the training of students, and what students need to do in each task. Understand the rationale behind each area in the assessment criteria, and also understand that we should penalize or praise always under one of the 4 umbrellas, right? So always as a teacher and a teacher assessor, when you see that you like something or you don't like something, well, try to identify under which umbrella this problem or this good example of good use of language is, in order to communicate that to your students. Understand and learn to apply the band descriptors and apply a systematic method when marking your students' writing. It could be the one suggested today or any other, but have some kind of systematization in this area. This will help you to be consistent in the way you judge the production of the students, and also in the way you can inform them about what they need to do, what they need to continue working on, and what they have done well. And familiarize your students with this method and make them apply it too. So this method that I am inviting you to use, you could also maybe simplify it and also share it with them. And when you plan your classroom activities, get them to apply this to working groups, to if you do peer correction, or if you decide to analyze some sample writing that you took from the handbook for teachers, or a sample that you have from any source, and you might devise some activities for the classroom, including the use of this method or any other method in which you involve your students and make it like natural to incorporate the assessment criteria. Let me pass on to the next. So, as regards sources or of extra support of material, apart from the course book that you're using, apart from the sample papers, the set of papers, sometimes some preparation centers use compilations of past papers or the ones that you get online. Well, let's also remind ourselves of the different resources that are available on the Cambridge English website. I don't know why cannot advance. Something's wrong and it doesn't let me go forward. Oh, there it is. Okay, so remember, these are different sources of material: the handbook for teachers, the sample papers, exam day tips, online practice activities, information for candidates, assessment scales. Well, this is what we have been looking at. Writing checklists for learners. There are also the writing guides, right? Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing and share it again. Let's see. Cambridge Assessment Learning English free online resources for different areas of practice that you'd like to focus on. Linking words, organizing writing, all the how-tos, right? Write a formal letter, emails, different genres. There is a wealth of materials that you can write. And finally, the Write and Improve resource, which is so useful. This is for candidates or students to work on their own, where they can choose topics, practice writing, submit their work, get feedback and grades very, very quickly, check their feedback, make changes. So this helps you with the process of developing their writing skill. This is just an idea of what it looks like for the candidate or the learner. And well, any questions? I know that Monica has been looking at the chat, and maybe you have some questions, specific questions that I may be able to answer, or we may send you the answers later.
Thank you, Clara. So far, there are no other questions. I'm just waiting to see if somebody types in another question. Oh, somebody is asking if the resources are for free. Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Well, I think that your presentation has been very clear, so there aren't any questions. So I think we can.
Okay, and I think that more or less we are fine with time too, because we were planning to finish at about 11:30, so I don't want to maybe extend this. I know you're very busy, probably you have classes. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's been useful. And well, you can contact us. You can contact the center, Monica, for any further queries or needs you may have. We're always happy to help.
Yes,
So thank you very much.
Sorry. There is one question.
Okay, yeah.
About grammatical structures for B2 and C1.
Well, I
Yes.
think they can definitely be found in the handbook, right, Monica? Or if
No,
not,
no,
not anymore.
unfortunately, no. The thing is that for B2 and C1, they practically need to be familiar with all the
Yeah.
grammar structures.
Yes, I see that. At these levels, they do not come because, right, that's why, because of what you are saying, Monica.
Yes.
We are dealing with, well, B2 level, which is kind of high intermediate. So basically, we're talking about a full command of all the aspects of reported speech, passive voice, the three conditionals, combined conditionals, modal verbs, all tenses, of course. Basically, they are expected at the B2 level to be able to use that. And then as you go further upwards in the scale and you move on to a C1, you would be expecting, of course, a higher level of control in the structures I have just mentioned, and more attempts and at more sophisticated structures such as inversion. I mean, somehow being able to notice that the candidate feels reasonably comfortable attempting and taking more risks with the language, and also with the use of lexis. When you talk about lexis for a B2 level, you are always thinking about everyday vocabulary, but in pretty much different areas of, I mean, not all walks of life, but I mean, many lexical areas that they have been accumulating through their learning process. And of course, in C1, the challenge is to incorporate more formal language and more specific, not only formal, but also more specific and more precise. So I think the difference is that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, you will be able to find those lists in the preparation books, in the grammar books and vocabulary books for B2 and C1. You do get the listings.
Okay, we will be sending information by mail. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clara. And well, hope to see you in our next webinar. Have a lovely day.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.